So I've been wanting to make this video for a while now. It's basically differentiating between vibe coding and agentic coding. For most people, this might be the same thing, as kind of vibe coding uses agentic coding. But I believe that separating both of them kind of gives us a guide to where we're at, what we're actually talking about, because a lot of programmers, a lot of developers do a lot of agentic coding. And most of the time when you hear about vibe coding, it's more of like a brain dead way of building apps. So the way I find it interesting to separate them is from tools. You have on the vibe coding range, Lovable, Bolt, Tempo, and there's a bunch more vibe coding tools where you already have a structure already done, and then you'll just build on top of that structure. While in Cursor and Cloud Code, you bring that into your IDE, so you have to actually set up the project. You have to do most of the things or most of the setup part yourself. Now, usually developers already understand what's going on, so this video is kind of targeted towards whoever is building things inside of vibe coding, or even who wants to build an app and wants to know like which direction to take, because you might hear a lot of build your app inside of Lovable, or no, the thing now is Cloud Code. So where should you actually start and why? And since I know a lot of people just like the answer as fast as possible, imagine that this big circle right here is agentic coding, and then we have vibe coding kind of in here. So vibe coding. And what these circles basically represent is the flexibility of building things. Inside of vibe coding, you're limited to whatever the platform you're building in really allows you to build. So you wouldn't be able to build a Chrome extension, for example, inside of Lovable, but you could with agentic coding. But I'm definitely not saying that you shouldn't use Lovable. It certainly creates things much faster, especially for whoever wants to see something really simple up pretty fast. It's like you have this whole setup, and you'll see throughout the video, just this is more for people who just want the answer as fast as possible, and I'm trying to really digest it in a fast way. But it's like if you have a entire setup, right? And this setup needs to be made independent on what you're building. The thing about Lovable or other vibe coding tools is that they grab this setup and place it in here in a way that most users will never have to even touch this. While through agentic coding, you'll have to actually build this setup and kind of iterate through it. So it's much less beginner friendly. So given that we have a much lower range of things that we could build with vibe coding, I'd argue that if you learn how to agentic code, you'll likely have more opportunities of ideas that you can explore, and therefore have a higher likely chance for you to actually build an app that brings value and would have a lot of users, which would actually allow you to monetize off of it. So long story short, I think some people would disagree with me in incentivizing people to just go directly to agentic coding, because you'll have to sometimes worry about code. But honestly, if someone wants to build something, I mean, the learning curve for agentic coding is kind of like this. While in vibe coding, you already have things already configured, so it kind of starts off up here, and it just improves as you improve your prompt and as you improve the context that you understand of what you're building. And finally, I'd argue that without knowing how to code, you can get to this point right here. At some level, you'll actually need to learn some like actual coding for you to improve the code, improve your platform overall. But I mean, the LLMs are getting smarter and smarter. They could predict this if you learn how to debug your system, if you learn how to test things, and really have the core concepts of building an app. I do actually believe that you can create a successful monetizable app. Not really a super scalable 1 million users app, but enough to get your idea to the market and finance the developers needed to actually scale the app. So all that said, let me read through this. Some parts of this I'll just skip, and some of them I'll stop and actually explain or even draw it inside of Excalidraw to make sure that everyone is on board. So the two paths of building, vibe coding versus agentic coding. In this article, I'd like to explore two concepts, vibe coding and agentic coding. Placing tools like Lovable, Bolt, and Tempo on the vibe coding side, and Cursor, Cloud Code, and Windsurf on the agentic end. Since these are relatively new concepts, there's a lot of misunderstanding and false promises about what each can achieve. I'll try to make it digestible for anyone with absolutely no prior tech experience. The goal is to understand the most effective path for using AI to build your idea and ideally monetize it. So down here, I just note that I recognize that vibe coding uses an agent to complete tasks, yet throughout this article, you'll understand why it feels appropriate to make clear distinctions from a utility standpoint as well as regarding the target audience for each. And I do say this as a developer since you see a lot of people saying that, hey, just vibe code your way into building apps. And I don't really feel like it's only asking the AI to build things. You actually need to know those concepts that I talked about earlier. And then because of that, I don't consider myself a vibe coder in the sense of just turning off my brain and asking AI to build things. I don't even think that is really sustainable to have an actual app. I think you can build kind of demos off of it, which are already pretty interesting. You test your ideas and everything, but I'm getting ahead of myself now. Let me just continue reading my article. So AI for building. Before anything else, let's understand what's this hype around AI and development. In this section, I really explain why AI is interesting for building things, why it suddenly became something that you could use to really build entire apps. So I show this example where I just type in create a login page for me in pure HTML. He's able to create that HTML. And then as soon as I open it, this is what I get. So just a login screen. And then I explain that, well, if you were to create this without using agents, this is how it would be like. You would end up using a lot of the context window. This wouldn't be cost efficient, nor would it even be possible because eventually the context window would be over and you wouldn't be able to keep iterating with AI. So this part I'll just skip because I believe that most of you already understands how this works. But a summary of this section is really here where I explain the logic of AI agents and how they work to provide the context needed to execute the task that you give it. So it really works like this. A user inputs edit the register button, make it blue. And let's consider that the path is kind of like this. You have a pages folder, that inside of that pages folder, you have an authentication folder. In there, you have the files called login and register. So what the AI kind of does, and this is really a rough example of that, but you have the task proposed by the user, which is edit the register button, make it blue. So the user really didn't give it a lot of context here. It doesn't even know what's going on. So the AI thinks, I need to make the register button blue, but where the F am I? So this is just to get people to understand that the core model doesn't know what's going on. Probably inside of the system prompting for a cursor or Claude Code, it's specified in there. So maybe in that system prompting, it says, you are inside of an IDE. You need to help the user code something. And then it knows because of that. But ideally, it'll just think, hey, yeah, where am I? What's going on? So the AI executes a tool to read what it's given. And in this case, it sees the folder names and some file names. And then it thinks, oh, I seem to be inside of a web app project in a Next.js framework. From my training, I know that pages are usually placed inside of the pages folder. So let's check if there is a register page in there. So then it goes inside of the page folder. It doesn't find anything there. The only thing it finds is an authentication folder, which really seems close to a login page. And then the next thing it does is really enter that auth folder. Then it finds the register page. Inside of that page, ideally, it won't just grab everything from that page because it could have thousands of lines. And maybe it doesn't need all those lines. So it reads the first lines, sees if the context that it needs is localized on those first 100 lines. If it isn't, it just continues searching. And then it goes on reading the next 100 lines, finds it, makes it blue. It actually uses a tool to edit that code. And then it thinks back to itself, okay, the task that I was given is done. So then it ends. So just from this, you get that it's basically a loop to achieve a specified task. This is the same inside of AI assistants like ChatGPT. This is the same inside of Claude and any AI assistant. This is the same for vibe coding as it is the same for agentic coding. So anywhere that you're using AI, it needs to kind of fetch for context. And using an agent really helps you find that context, not only find it, but actually execute tools like the edit code tool to accomplish the task that you give it. Now let's define vibe coding. Andre Karpathy, I think that's how you pronounce it. He made this X post right here, which got vibe coding the popularity that it has today. And the post was basically, there is a new kind of coding I call vibe coding, where you fully give into the vibes, embrace the exponentials, and forget that the code even exists. So yeah, you can keep reading on, but in my personal feeling from what he wrote here, and knowing that he's a developer, it wasn't really in a brain dead way, because if he wasn't really thinking about coding, he wouldn't even know about like decrease the padding on the sidebar by half. Because I don't think most people would really talk like this. This is really a kind of a developer talk, like decrease the padding. Most people would just say like there's a margin and like decrease the margin, right? And then the AI would probably confuse itself with, do I need to reduce the margin or the padding? So in a sense, there is some level of, like I said in the beginning, some concepts that you have to pass over to the AI so that it achieves what you want, at least faster. Because you can really get to any result with AI if you prompt it enough to do so, but ideally you want to get it as fast as possible, or else you'll just be using up all of your tokens. So yeah, I mean, in my opinion, he didn't mean that in such a brain-dead way, but a lot of companies saw an opportunity in this. A non-technical person doesn't know how to start building a website. Most people don't know the difference between backend and frontend. They don't know how a database works, let alone how to configure authentication or payments. So the simple idea was having all this pre-configured. All the code structure in the AI's context so it knows exactly how to work with it. And finally, have everything already deployed. Let's compare this with a Subway sandwich. The bun is the foundation, the setup. The structure we talked about previously, all pre-configured along with the deployment. So actually, to get my point across, let me start up a new project, and I'll show you exactly what is the difference between what I'm calling vibe coding and the agentic coding side of things. So inside of Lovable, you can just type it to create a landing page for a financial app. It should use ShadCN UI and a neo-brutalist style design, actually. Okay. Place. Actually, I'm not even going to specify the sections. Let's see what it builds for us. So ideally, you should give it the full context, but in this case, I just want to see what Lovable builds for us. And while that's being built, let's open up the terminal. And here's the main difference. Lovable already has everything set up. It doesn't have to do what I'm going to do now. So let me cd into the downloads folder. In here, I'll create a new folder called blah, blah. Then I'll cd into blah, blah, code space dot. Now I have the folder opened up here. Let me open up my terminal. Let's type in yarn create next app dot. This I'm doing right here is the exact setup that most people, especially non-technical people, would avoid, since you have to do a bunch of pre-installations to this. So for example, you need to install Node inside of your computer. If I'm using Yarn, so you'd have to install Yarn as well. And that is all inside of the terminal. Most people just avoid using the terminal for whatever reason. I mean, it's kind of frightening since it's a bunch of characters, but it's really just a set of commands that you can execute. And yeah, it seems like Lovable made a sound here. So yeah, let me approve this and get back to building inside of my own app. Let me clear out the terminal, hit yarn dev to open up the project. And this is what I have. So localhost 3000, this is kind of a pre-made project. And this really isn't the only thing that Lovable has. It has integration with Supabase. It has integration with Stripe because of Supabase and everything. So all the backend logic is executed inside of Supabase. What Lovable really handles is the front side. So all the components and everything to make the app actually beautiful. But yeah, now that we have this, let me actually place in the same prompt of create a landing page for a financial app. It should use ShadCN UI and have a neo-brutalist design. I'll use Claude for Sonnet's thinking model and just let Cursor create everything for me. So here we're basically back to whatever is going on inside of Lovable. And speaking of which, it's already done. So it created all this for us. Let me actually click here to see it alone in the browser. This is everything Lovable built for us, and it's even already deployed. Now, I'm not even arguing that in vibe coding, you won't have access to the code, because you actually do have access to it. Just click here, and you'll actually see all the files from your project, just as I'm seeing here in Cursor. But one of the differences is that here in Cursor, I chose to build a Next.js app. I could have chosen to build a extension, for example. I could have chosen to build just a Python script that runs internally inside of my company. Well, inside of Lovable, this is all predefined, and you are kind of limited to whatever is in here. And a bunch of developers even argue that you have a bunch of components here that aren't really used. So a drawer, for example, this is a drawer from ShadCN. If you head over to ShadCN UI, you'll get all their components listed right here. And that's basically what Lovable did. They placed all of these components already inside of their project so that if you ever need to use any one of them, they're already listed there and the AI will just use it as instructed. So you have a bunch of components that aren't being used. And I believe that's a cost to the server, not much to the client, since these components won't be rendered in the final, those pages that are built and being used by the final user. But honestly, at this stage, it's kind of overthinking since you really just want to get an MVP out as fast as possible. While I'm speaking, it seems like it's already done. Let's go over to that build. And this is what Cursor built for us. Both of these apps seem like they're really zoomed in, but it's actually because it's zoomed in. I zoom it in to make the videos. So if I remove the zoom, this is kind of what it would actually look like. When you don't give enough context to the LM of what you want, the randomness of what it'll create is pretty high. So at this stage, I've shown you that you can pretty much create the same thing in both, with the difference where this is already deployed. You had much less control, but it was built faster. While this one, it was a bit slower, let's say. But once you wrap your head around using Next.js, for example, you could structure this even better as to having API endpoints where you'll execute a lot of server-side logic to create features that would just work much faster here. So yeah, let's continue reading. Here is where it gets tricky. Most developers were bothered by this. Imagine you've been building apps for years and suddenly there's claims of people with no prior coding experience making hundreds of thousands of dollars with their AI-built app. Having worked as a developer and learning how other developers see projects, I made up my own theory about this. Often we are attracted by the technical difficulty behind a project, which is absolute dopamine for us. It's like solving a Rubik's Cube or a puzzle, such that when we solve the technical part, which is basically 80% of the app, and took us a week, the other 20% might take us months and will likely be abandoned. If you are a developer listening to this and you've done this a couple of times, leave a comment down below, please. So the correlation between a successful web app and a genius tech implementation is made automatically, therefore making developers skeptical about people actually making money with vibe coding. In reality, niche expertise is everything. If you know your niche well enough, you know exactly what bothers you and how that could be fixed, and even how you'd distribute the idea. That's absolute gold. So the technical implementation most of the time is just the absolute basic front-end input and output, but it solves a problem. It brings value and therefore makes money. And what I mean about this is if you are a niche expert, let's say if you're into finance, you know specific problems from finance that you could solve with an app or with some kind of tool, Python, extension, a web app, something, of which the implementation could be really simple, but since you have this expertise, you know that it could be valuable. As if you tell this to a developer, they'll just say, well, why would I create this? This is dumb. This is silly. So I continued on with, I just hate the preaching about these vibe-coded apps being scalable and robust. They aren't. Most don't make money, look ugly, are unusable, and have zero value. Most, not all of them. I just guess that since the marketing attracts the make money fast and easy audience, they're just too lazy to even try to understand the limitations of AI web app builders. Like, for example, most of them would just see the title of this video and think, I just prefer vibe coding. Agentic coding might be for developers, so I'm not interested in that. I don't want to learn concepts. I don't want to learn really anything. I just want to build things fast and easy and just to get it out there and make a lot of money. And even so, we have a bunch of high-tech websites that look amazing, are efficiently usable, receive hundreds of thousands in funding with an entire dev team and still provide zero value. So yeah, vibe coding is basically using AI to democratize micro SaaS builds. They validate your idea. This alone is massive. Then I go on to say, but there's an alternative that I'd say is the real gold in using AI to build web apps: agentic coding. I need to note that I discovered this term while watching my favorite content creator, Web Dev Cody. This guy is my main reference to building apps fast. I mean, I learned how to build apps, and I think I explained this down here. So yeah, since didn't see myself in the vibe coding circle, but understood perfectly how much AI helps us build things, this term seemed perfect. My personal experience might matter a bit while explaining my enthusiasm with agentic coding. So here it is. Yeah, then I go on to explain that I'm a developer for over 10 years. At some point, I was just using PHP, building things with like pure JavaScript, CSS. Didn't really even use GitHub. At that point, I was using Google Drive to save my apps. So, I mean, there might be a flaw in this 10 years since in the beginning, it was just me trying to build apps and like the fastest way possible to get my idea out there. Which, by the way, WebDev Cody contributed a lot eventually because of him, I learned a lot of tools that we could use to build things faster. At which I eventually just recognized I love building things and that with AI, you can empower anyone, even without a technical expertise, to build their ideas just like I was doing. And that's really what got me to create my own community as well as this channel. So back to the article, I note that at this point, I'd understood the exact lines of code I needed to type to make Next.js page render statically, or to ensure my API routes were protected. I'd build the same structure hundreds of times, but as AI models evolved, I noticed something interesting. I wasn't coding anymore. I didn't have to look up how to perform incremental static regeneration in Next.js, write the code, build the app, and see if it was rendering statically. Now I was just asking the AI, make the page X perform incremental static regeneration, revalidate every 1 hour. It would code everything, build the app, check if it was successful, and done. So at this point, I recognized that I was still being an engineer by recognizing that I needed incremental static regeneration to understand that concept, to look at the code and see if it was implemented correctly. But I wasn't worried about memorizing each detail of the actual code. This made me extremely curious to see if someone with absolutely no coding experience, but the right concepts in mind would be able to create an entire app. So I tested it with some members of my school community, as well as with some friends that were interested in becoming AI automators. Yeah, about AI automators, I feel like that's something else. Like it's kind of in the same realm as vibe coders, right? Because you have all the AI automation thing. And I've even considered removing the AI automation from the title of my channel. I think it's more towards building things, not really implementing AI, but using AI to build things. So yeah, the first thing I had in mind is the AI has to have full context of the entire app. So all the tools need to be integrated in the codebase. I'd also explain to them that Next.js handles front-end, back-end. I'd explain why to use ShadCN and how Prisma would allow the AI model to apply changes to our database independently. And then, I explained all this about Next.js, but then George, my childhood friend, basically, he decided he wanted to create a Chrome extension for accessibility. And that's where I joined him in a bunch of calls to ensure that he got the right concepts of actually building this. So understanding really about iframe, about the database, how would he associate the video that he wanted to be used in the given Netflix link. But yeah, this is basically a Chrome extension that synchronizes a sign language interpreter video with the Netflix content in real time. So this is how it works. If you're inside of Netflix, you can just click on the extension, click to see the movies available. And just as a test, we can select Puss in Boots. You'll be taken to the page of that movie that you selected, and then you can actually see the translation for that given movie. This is just a dummy video up here, but all these controls, this is pretty interesting. Even the synchronization, when you click on that, it synchronizes with wherever is the timeline of the video. And if you move ahead, by the way, this isn't showing because I'm recording and then Netflix just blocks me from recording the video. But yeah, basically as the movie goes on, you can advance a bit and then it'll synchronize back. If you pause the video there, it will pause as well. So this full synchronization is the beauty of it. And what I think is fantastic about this is that it's an actually life-changing project that could both support an entire community and bring some money to the table. So yeah, agentic coding allowed him to explore more than web apps. So just as a disclaimer, no, I wouldn't market this as build a scalable web app in days with AI. Without the coding expertise and enough context, I don't believe current LLMs can build that. But I've noticed much more flexibility for these MVPs than those built with vibe coding apps. It's like if vibe coding, you always have to go with the white bread they bake for you, while also risking asking for an additional option from the menu that you thought would be free. Now, this is more because a lot of people think that if they build their own app and deploy it, they might have some unpredictable charges. But if you deploy over to a VPS, you won't have those unpredictable charges. By the way, this video isn't being sponsored, but I've talked about Hostinger multiple times. And I mean, even without them sponsoring, I really think it's just awesome going with a VPS from Hostinger. You can choose a KVM2 plan and have your entire website hosted in there. You can even use Leonardo Grig apply. That'll give you 10% coupon discount. And this value won't change if you suddenly get a lot of different users. You won't have to worry about any extra charge or anything. So I tried separating vibe coding from agentic coding from this perspective, where what you can build in vibe coding, most of the vibe coding, obviously there will be some platforms that allows you to build an extension, for example. That is a good idea, actually. I don't know if there already is one. If there are, please let me know down in the comment section. So yeah, in agentic coding, you're really like natively coding things. You're actually using AI to code things, but you have full control of the entire setup and whatever you're building. This setup is really seamless inside of vibe coding. You really don't need to set that up. But in agentic coding, you have to go through the entire setup process. While in deployment, you have to set it up as well, but it's fully predictable. While in vibe coding, it's mostly unpredictable costs. I believe that in Lovable, for example, you pay, I don't know how much it is, but you pay a certain value. And then if you get a lot of traffic, like you get a lot of users in your app that goes beyond that value, what they do is just stop your service and not really charge you more for that. But there's a lot of other vibe coding services that I've seen that suddenly you'll get a spike of users and your credit card is registered there, then you'll suddenly receive an unexpected charge. So here's that graph that I talked about initially. And then, yeah, to sum everything up, use vibe coding to understand how AI helps us build things, learn basic concepts and tools like backend, frontend, full stack, Next.js, Postgres, UI, Shadcn, Prisma. All this might sound frightening at first, but I guarantee you it's really easy. It's especially like these tools are made to make it easy for us. So move to agentic coding and use Claude Code/Cursor to build your app. Ideally, Claude Code, actually. So finally, don't get me wrong, vibe coding tools are improving like crazy. The speed, the polish, the features they're adding, it's impressive stuff. The problem is everyone's using them. You've got thousands of people launching similar apps every week. If you want to actually differentiate yourself from this massive wave of vibe-coded apps, you're honestly just a handful of tools, some setup knowledge, and basic concepts away from stepping into a completely different league. It's funny that this final part really expressed what I wanted to say, but it's too AI-ish. Like, the only part of the entire text that I asked AI to create really looks a lot like AI, despite me asking for it to like use my style and tone and everything. But yeah, we're talking weeks of learning, not years. And while I can't promise you'll build the next unicorn SaaS, you'll absolutely be able to create efficient single feature micro SaaS products without touching code. That's exactly, and by the way, this single feature micro SaaS products, this naming was from Samin Yassar. I was really talking to him about the ability of creating things inside of vibe coding or even agentic coding. And then he came up with this where I think this is a good way to put it. Most people, like if you don't have any coding experience, you'll be able to create like really a single feature micro SaaS products. You shouldn't be aiming to build like the next Uber or yeah. So that's exactly what I'm testing with the 10 days course I launched in. Yeah, then I do my little marketing of the 10 days course that I'm launching inside of the AI Forge community, where I try to go through the full setup and then how to actually prompt the AI to build whatever you need to build. I truly believe that it's possible for an absolute beginner to build a complete app and have it launched, monetize, make some money off of it, all with agentic coding. And honestly, I hope most of them come from my community or if you're a subscriber from the channel. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this style of video, please let me know by leaving a like or even a comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then.